we didn't think of it much. We brushed it off as this weird thing in our head. But in hindsight, we feel a bit bad for it because it feels not nice to mess with other people's existence, basically. Hey all and every many, thanks for switching in to Housemates for Life, a podcast powered by plurals for plurals and everybody else who wants to hear more about the insanely world of plurality. Here we talk about the good, the bad, the ugly and the beautiful sides of sharing a body and mind. In the previous episodes, we talked a bit about how our system works and how it affects our daily life, and now you might probably wonder, how did you never knew about this? How did it take you almost 30 years to realize that about yourselves? Well, in this episode, it's kind of a bit of a special, we will tell you a bit about our discovery journey, so how we found out that we are a plural system. From our earliest plural experiences to how we gradually discovered more headmates in our system and how we eventually found out that plurality is a thing and that we are a system. We are the voices of just a rather very insane system, aka Jarvis, and I am your host for this episode, but I'm actually just here for the intro and maybe the outro, but I'm so excited to have my headmates running this episode today. First, you will hear about our Syscovery journey from my headmate Yuri, and then my other headmate will talk about the other part of our journey. If you enjoy listening to our podcast, Housemates for Life, please tell a friend or more and leave a like, subscribe, rate, comment, and everything else you do to show your support and appreciation. Many thanks. Now let's get on with our show. Now for the first part of this episode, here's my headmate Yuri. Welcome to the stage. Woo! Hello, everybody. This is Yuri talking now. It is a bit difficult for me right now to front and speak because I rarely do that lately. There were times where I was fronting more often. But nowadays, since we discovered our system, I've retreated a bit more into the background. I'm very active inside, but not so much out at front. So yeah, it's a bit difficult to feel grounded or have a tight grip. But I think it will get better the more I talk about our experiences. So this will be about our Syscovery journey, so the long way that we took to discover that we are plural, that we are a system of multiple headmates. And first of all, I should say that we have always been a system. We didn't just become plural suddenly. We all feel like we have been like this either from birth or since an early age. And then, at some point in our life, things happened. We will talk about that. And then we noticed that we are plural, that we share, each of us shares a life with others in the same body. So for example, we all feel like, or most of us feel like we have been here since our early age. So we all access the same memories. But we also have like specific memories that we associate to ourselves. or strongly associated to ourselves. And so for me, for example, I don't feel like I was around a lot during our childhood, but still I have this memory, and we must have been less than 4 years old, roughly 3 years old maybe. I remember we got, and I don't know why we have this memory, but we got a snake plushie from a neighbor back then. We don't even remember that neighbor, but I remember that plushie. It was one of my favorite. It was a dark green snake, and you could, like, there was a wire inside so you could bend it, and it would stay in the shape. And I love frogs, I love snakes, lizards, dinosaurs, all these reptiles and amphibia. I mean, I like all animals. I don't know if there's any animal that I don't like, but I like these a lot. So yeah, we have always been there, but we just never knew that plurality is a thing, that we could be multiple in one body. But still, we had a few plural experiences through our life. They weren't, in the beginning, they weren't so significant for our daily life, so we never thought much about it. So the first thing that we remember, and we don't actually know, it feels like that we were more blended together in the past, entangled in each other. But we remember when we were around about 12 years old that we could talk to this other presence in our head, and it felt like kind of some sort of guardian angel or something. It was a very kind and calm and wise presence. It wasn't so much a voice. We weren't hearing a voice in that sense. It was more like it was another me or another us talking in our head. So although it appeared to us like a spiritual experience, we never thought of it as being anything supernatural. We thought, we are natural scientists. We kind of thought this is just how psychology works. This is happening in our brain. We were aware that we have a physical brain, and this was happening inside us. It wasn't really, it didn't feel external. It wasn't a hallucination or anything. It was just us. Well, we thought back then we are I or me. It was just us talking to this other us in our head. So we could talk about our problems, wishes, anything, and this other being would answer to that quite naturally. Like, it was like you can have a monologue in your head, but it just always felt more like a dialogue. It felt like one thought or presence reacting and responding to the other. But it never felt like that we are the other presence. It always felt like we are, quote unquote, me, and then there's this other being, this guardian spirit. We always thought of it as kind of the big brother that we never had, and wanted to talk to someone who's just there. And this kind of wise, calming, soothing presence. And we really didn't think anything bad of it, or anything is wrong or anything is odd. It was like, we get sometimes surprised or sad that a lot of people report that they hear voices in their head, and these voices are mean to them, saying mean things or saying toxic things or things like that. And it was never forced like that. It was always kind voice, kind guidance. So yeah, we are often very surprised and shocked that some people have very different experiences with. Whoopsie. I hit something here. So yeah, we are surprised when people report that they have sometimes not so nice first experiences with plurality or voice hearing. We in fact we always compared it to religious beliefs, praying to a god or entity. Like, we always felt like, oh yeah, it makes sense that people would believe in God or guardian angels or something like that if they can hear or engage with another wise voice in their head. It makes sense to interpret this as something, some kind of spirit. And it just made sense to us that people would believe in God or something. We didn't think of it like that, but we thought, yeah, it makes sense. It totally makes sense. And so yeah, it wasn't really a persistent thing in our life. It wasn't really there 24/7. It was just occasionally we would have a bad experience, would feel sad, bad, or whatever, and then we would just turn to that inner spirit, or it would just come to us and guide us back to a more positive path. I'm not sure. We can't really remember much details, but most of the time I think we would just pray. Yeah, it was kind of a praying to better times, praying to. Oh, I think a cat sneezed in the background. It was like praying, and wishing, sending out wishes to the universe, and hoping to get those wishes fulfilled. And often it happened, and then we were grateful. We were thanking our inner spirit for making our wishes come true. Something like that. So it wasn't really a big part of our life. It was just one part of our life. And at the same time, around about that same time, we also had the first time we had access to some sort of inner world. So a lot of plural systems, not all, but a lot of plural systems have an inner world. Either it is there, or they can create it, or adjust it to their needs, where headmates can live or go to and interact. And we also had this inner world suddenly popping up. It was just there. It was this kind of clearing in a forest, and there was like this big pond or small lake, and this spirit figure would live there, would be there. Like, we could imagine going there and being with them there. But it wasn't really like being there, but kind of a meditative visualization. But back then, as 12, 13, 14-year-old kid, it wasn't so vivid. We didn't have that much of access. And we never thought much about it, actually. Only in hindsight, it feels like this was quite a significant typical plural experience, I think. But we did try, at that time, like 14, 15-year-old, we also learned about lucid dreaming. And I think I personally, Yuri, I was very into that. And it just supported our view that the brain or mind, human mind, is capable of such great, amazing things. Like, I should say, lucid dreaming is when you're dreaming and you become aware that you are in a dream, and you can, to some extent, control what's happening in your dream, or at least you can experience it more consciously. And so I read up on lucid dreaming a lot, and I remember we had two main goals in the beginning, what we want to do in our lucid dream. One is flying, of course. And the other was we want to meet that inner spirit. Just for fun, we thought if it's in our head, it must somehow be accessible in our dreams as well. So our plan was to meet that inner spirit in this inner world lake place. We succeeded once. We met that person, spirit, but it wasn't much, just a meeting, saying hi, and then our dream became unstable. And yeah, we had a few lucid dreams back then, but not enough to actually have enough control over them. And yeah, so this spirit wasn't really a big part of our life. It was very important to us, it was very sacred for us, but it wasn't anything that affected our daily life. We never spoke to anybody about it. We also didn't want to. It felt like this is our big secret, our only we know about it. We kind of. And then as we grew older, when we were like 16, 17, 18, it became less and less. The interactions became less and less. We kind of felt more grounded or stable in our life as we grew older. We didn't feel like we needed that spirit so much. We didn't need to pray for better times. We had more agency over our life to make those better times for ourselves. Something like that. And another one of our early plural experiences was also during our late teens, which back then we didn't know that, we couldn't even imagine that this has anything to do with being plural. But in hindsight, this is a very, very plural experience, and it was back then we started drawing comics. For a while we were really into that, and we had this original character, and we're drawing comics about him on a daily basis almost, and we knew that character in and out, like even independent from the story in the comic. We could put this character in any situation and we would always know how he would react in that situation, or what he would say or think or do. And at some point, suddenly, that character started talking to us back, similar to that spirit voice. So we never felt like we are that person, but it was talking to us in our head. I think Kitty sneezed again. I think she caught a cold or something. Poor little kitty. So there was this character talking to us, and this is called, in the plural community, it's called a tulpa, or so tulpa is a headmate that was intentionally or accidentally, in our case, created and became a self-aware entity inside a system, And we didn't know that that's what's happening. We just thought our brain is doing funny things again, like with that guardian spirit a few years before. Now there's this character that we know so well, and now our brain enables us to have a dialogue with that person, and we just thought it's funny. In hindsight, we don't think it's funny because that person was complaining a lot, complaining that we created him and complaining that we were drawing these comics, making these stories about him, basically, quote unquote, using him for our entertainment. We didn't think of it much. We brushed it off as this weird thing in our head, but in hindsight, we feel a bit bad for it, because especially now that we know about our system, it feels not nice to mess with other people's consciousness or other people's existence, basically. This is not meant to say that we are against tulpamancy or all tulpas have a bad life or complain about their existence. That's not the case. We have heard many tulpas report themselves that they are glad to exist and be happy to be brought to life. Just in our case, it wasn't such a nice experience, so we're a bit cautious with creating other tulpas. And sometimes we still do some creative writing, and some of our characters sometimes feel so vivid and alive. At least one of them is kind of semi-aware, but we try to keep them unaware of their origin or existence and keep them in their own worlds inside ours. We don't want them to be part of this external world without them having actually a say whether they want to or not, because we wouldn't want that. We wouldn't want to be suddenly pulled into somebody's brain and have to exist there for the rest of our life. It's if you want to create a system, if you want to create tulpas, just be aware it's like having a child, basically. It's for life. It's not, you can't erase them, and you are responsible for their existence, for their life. So just keep that in mind. I also wanted to add that around that time, so during our late teens, I think round about when we were 16 and onwards, I personally, Yuri, feel like there was the time where I started to develop my own personality more and more. So I don't feel like I was around much during our childhood. I have a few memories from childhood, but a few memories that I associate with myself, but I just don't feel like, I don't really feel I'm around much among family. It feels odd. It feels foreign to me. And I think this is kind of some sort of depersonalization. Well, not really. Maybe it's just a plural experience. But as we grew older and more independent, I feel like that's when my personal personality was developing more and more. And I also feel like, so I'm an age slider, so my age is different from the body age. And I feel like my default age is round about that time, like 16 or late teens. But I can also switch my age. Like I slide down the age scale. Sometimes I'm more childish, more younger. and become more like the little sister of the system. And sometimes I'm older. I try to be the big sister for my system mates. And yeah, I just wanted to mention that because I find it interesting that around that time I developed my personality, and I feel like that's my default age. And also at that time we used many different nicknames online. We would always change that because we could never settle for anything. I think that's very pluralish to do. But around that time we once used Yuri as a online nickname, and we never used it again online, but the name kind of stuck with us. We kept using it with a friend that we met online, so that friend knew us by the name Yuri, and we knew them by their online name, and we just kept calling each other that. So that name kind of stuck with us, and that will be more or less important for the next part of this episode. So a bit later, in our early 20s, we noticed more and more these quote unquote other versions of ourselves. Like back then we still believed that, yeah, I'm one body, I'm one person, I have one ID card, one name, and yeah, I have multiple versions or parts, and that's totally normal human experience. And yeah, we noticed these other two that so this is all talking about it in hindsight. Like we can't go back into time and check, but this is how we feel or interpret it, is that me, so Yuri, Matt, and Will, we used to be somehow the core identity of this human mingled together, often blend together, or we were more active in our daily life. And then aside from us, our core members, we noticed these other two. Well, we had these other presence before during our teens, but this time there were these other two people that we become occasionally. They weren't present in our head that would talk to us. They were actually, yeah, really part of me, parts of me. And we didn't think that anything was off with that. We had a bit of struggles with those. I will not name them here. If they want to come on this podcast, they can introduce their names, but let's just call them J and K. And we had they were quite different from our core identity. So it never felt like this is me or this is who I want to be. So it felt more intrusive. It felt not right. And we didn't want them to be there at first. So it felt like we need to do something about it. We need to get rid of them. We need to make them be there less. And we only talked about this for the first time was in 2016, was the first time we actually actively talked about it in that way to somebody else. They didn't have names back then, but we talked about these other two versions aside from our core version. And then later, 2 years later, around about 2018, second half, they got names for the first time. And this is kind of a funny story, because one day we were sitting in our office at work, and a colleague would come in and then greet us with our collective name, our legal name back then, and greet us with that name. But then Jay, this other headmate, was apparently at front and would be like, "No, that's not my name. My name is Jay." And it was just meant as a joke. And we would just keep joking with our colleague that, we have this quote unquote evil twin called Jay, and would just joke about it casually. But then also our colleague kind of recognized when we would switch. Our colleague would call us Jay whenever it felt like Jay was at work. And then we were like, maybe there's more to it. Maybe let's dig into this a bit more. And it felt like helping. It felt like giving that other version a name felt like it helped us to recognize it. It feels odd to call it. But back then we thought of it as more a version or part of ourselves. So giving that person a name helped us to recognize them better and kind of better regulate be more aware of our moods and regulate our emotions. So we also gave the other person also their name K, which their name just came to our mind. It was just, sometimes this naming feels so random, but also at the same time it feels like, yeah, that name fits, and it feels weird to change it. So we had these names for these other two people, and so naturally we needed a name for our core self and identity, and it couldn't be the same name that we used collectively, our legal name. It needed to be something different, because we were all part of that collective, but we still had individual names. So that core self, which in hindsight it was all three of us, so me, Matt, and Will, but we called that core self Yuri because that was the name we used back then as teens, and that stick with us and felt like a more spiritual or soul name. And so that's what we called ourselves as a trio until the other two had their own names and realized themselves, or when we realized we're not just one core self, but that comes later. And then also simultaneously at that time, or it was mainly me driving that, we were more into mindfulness meditation. I mean, we always, or at least I always had a knack for that. But at that time it was a period where we were more into it than usual. And I should mention here that if you're prone to dissociation, or if you have a trauma history, I guess probably you wouldn't know that before discovering it, but there was, at least like for us, we never heard of dissociation before, and we never thought of ourselves as living with trauma or traumatized parts. But if you know that, be careful about mindfulness and meditation. We learned that certain practices can trigger trauma memories or dissociation, and you should practice mindfulness or meditation with guidance that is trauma informed. We got this book recommended, Trauma Sensitive Mindfulness. I forgot the author's name. I will look it up quickly. Oh, right. So it's called Trauma Sensitive Mindfulness by David Treleaven. Treleaven, I think it's pronounced. Yeah, I recommend that first before diving into mindfulness. Even though it helped us in the past, it also caused a lot of troubles regarding to dissociation, which I might actually cover in a different episode. Yeah, it was helpful, but also we wish we knew all of that before and had a bit more of a clearer or guided experiences with all of that. But yeah, that's how it happened to us. So we went to these guided meditation sessions weekly, and there was one session about forgiveness. And it was this guided meditation where we should think about someone that we had an argument with or feel bad about in our life, and practice forgiveness during that session. But we couldn't really think of a person in that moment that we would need to forgive. So I decided, I say I because I strongly believe that I was there at that time. So I chose to try that exercise with these other two people, J and K. Because, yeah, as I mentioned before, we had our difficulties with them. And so this guided meditation practice was quite an intense thing. I remember. So I was imagining them. They kind of also had a visual appearance as much as I did. Like we had this, for some reason, these visual. We each had different haircuts, body shapes. I'm not sure why. It's just how it works, I guess. And I was just talking to them in our head during that meditation session, and I forgave them for being who they are. I forgave them their flaws and how that affects our life, and promised them to work with them, not against them, but with them, and help them to better themselves, become better versions of themselves. Not a better version of myself, but a better version of themselves. And felt like, yeah, accepting them as part of myself and a part of my life. And so instead of pushing them away or wanting to get rid of them, we started to see them as parts of us. But literally, not literally, I guess you know what I mean. And that was a really, really beautiful, wholesome meditation session. I really love thinking back to that. And that was kind of the starting point, I think, for our system discovery. So yeah, these were our first experiences with plurality and meeting other people in our head. But the real discovery is yet to come, and my headmate Will is going to tell you more about that. But we decided to split this episode into 2 parts, so we will make a cut here, and my headmate Will is going to talk about the rest of our Syscovery journey in the next episode. enjoy. And I'm happy to be here. I'm glad that I could talk to you all, since I don't do that very often lately, but it feels good to be out from time to time and kind of remember that I also exist, not only in our head, but also in this body and life. Bye, everyone, or every many. I hope you all enjoyed this episode. This is Matt again doing the outro, my second favorite part right after the intro. This episode was brought to you by the Voices of Jarvis. Thank you, all beautiful souls out there, for listening to our podcast and all your support and kind words. We really appreciate it. It really keeps us motivated and keep going with this podcast, seeing that it actually has the desired effect that we intended when we started this project. If you enjoyed this episode and think it brought a little bit of value to your life, please tell a friend or more, and leave a like and subscribe, write comment, because it will help other people find this episode. Many thanks for your support. And as I always like to say, let your personality shine brighter than your eyes and your confidence shout louder than your voice. Until next time with Housemates for Life.